This is the first day of this February 2026 two-day session. And for the next 2 days, we'll be reading from Silent Illumination, a Chan Buddhist Path to Natural Awakening by Guo Gu. Guo Gu is a Chan teacher in Tallahassee, Florida. I believe that's where his center. He's a Dharma heir of Sheng Yen, Master Sheng Yen. And it occurred to me, we have quite a bit of affinity, not only for his writings, his teachings, and this is Guo Gu, but especially of Sheng Yen. We have a little bit of a history with him. Sheng Yen, of course, Master Sheng Yen, I think he died in the 90s, not quite sure, but recently, or the early 2000s, and really spoke highly of Roshi Kapleau. They knew each other. I don't know how many times they've met, but and then when Roshi Kapleau died in 2004, John Crook, a Dharma heir of Master Sheng Yen, he's Welsh, and he wrote quite a moving letter about meeting Roshi Kapleau, and so we definitely have. Oh, and then one last thing it dawned on me as well, and Roshi gave actually a teisho about this. Bodhin Roshi was invited to this opening of Master Sheng Yen's monastery in Taiwan, and his trip was paid for, and he went with an attendant, and got to see this huge complex that was built. The one thing I remember from that teisho in particular is that all the monks, not sure if there were nuns there, but it was probably just monks. It was a traditional Chinese monastery. This is again in Taiwan. They all had cell phones like they had it around on their front of their robes. They had like a necklace with their cell phones dangling. It was such a large complex, and that's how they found each other. All right, Silent Illumination. A little bit more about Guo Gu here. I'm just reading a little bio in the back. Guo Gu is a Chan teacher, author, and Buddhist scholar. He's the founder of the Tallahassee Chan Center in Florida, and of the socially engaged interdenominational Buddhist organization Dharma Relief. Guo Gu first learned about meditation as a child in 1972, and this is when he was living in Taiwan. And he learned it from one of the most respected Chinese meditation masters and ascetics in Taiwan. In 1980, Guo Gu moved to the United States and began study with Master Sheng Yen. Yes, so Sheng Yen died in 2009. His years were 1931 to 2009. In 1991, Guo Gu was ordained as a monk and became Master Sheng Yen's first personal attendant and assistant. And then in 1995, he experienced his first breakthrough and was given permission to teach Chan independently, representing Master Sheng Yen at his home monastery and in different parts of the world. His subsequent experiences of Chan were also recognized by other teachers in both the Chan and Japanese Zen traditions. Wanting to bring Buddhism beyond monastic walls, Guo Gu left monkhood and re-entered the world in 2000. And then in 2008, he received a PhD in Buddhist studies from Princeton University and began teaching as a professor of Buddhist studies at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida. All right, and so we're going to start off with chapter 2, starting from where we are. Chan offers no particular fixed way to practice. The only purpose of practice is to uproot our deep-seated emotional afflictions and negative habitual patterns. I'll repeat that. The only purpose of practice is to uproot our deep-seated emotional afflictions and negative habitual patterns that conceal our true awakened nature, and at the same time, develop our true potential. Yet over the centuries, Chan masters have developed numerous skillful means to help people. I just want to get back to this. This is what I was talking about yesterday in my opening talk about negative habitual patterns or just negative thoughts. There's just something about those that, at least for me, that I've seen in my own practice that are particularly sticky. And again, I don't know if it's particular to our culture. I don't think it is, because here Google has just brought this up. But yeah, we'll be going back to this, talking about this. But all thoughts are just thoughts. They're not good. They're not bad. It's it's the clinging to our thoughts that is the problem. And then, of course, some of the thoughts that come up are just really can be particularly negative, and then when that happens, we tend to react to those and cling to them, and then we're off and running, either feeling sorry for ourselves or feeling thoughts about the state of the world, or just this negativity about our own practice, or negativity towards others that perhaps bother us while we're practicing. We're just off and running. The number of negative thoughts, just the number of thoughts, period, is numberless. 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 different kinds of thoughts. They're all thoughts. Treat them all equally. Not good, not bad. Just thoughts. Before we discuss the actual practices to realize silent illumination, we need to understand and to develop a conviction regarding our true nature, our Buddha nature. We also need to learn to expose, embrace, and transform the emotional afflictions and negative habitual patterns, the root of which is self-grasping. All right, I want to break down this a little bit. Expose, embrace, and transform. So, expose. It's just noticing what's going on in the mind. To see, just it reveals itself. When we start practice, most of us don't have a clue as to what's going on in the mind. But slowly, surely, as we progress, as we deepen our practice, then we really start noticing what's going on in the mind. Okay, so that's exposed, to see, to notice. And, by the way, it is an endless process. I don't know if Goku has mentioned this yet, but this is a lifetime practice. And it's really an amazing, not perplexing, but it's just an astonishing thing. How as time goes on, year after year, we see layers and layers of more. We drop certain habitual habit patterns in our minds, whether they're emotional or mental. We see them, we notice them, we move on from them, which we'll be talking about a little later on here, and then there's something else underneath. It's just this continual process. All right, embrace. So then we have expose and we have embrace. Not sure about embrace. Perhaps a better word would be not react to. Not being reactive to what we notice. Perhaps accepting, not suppressing. This is really a key thing to practice, to not try and suppress or to stop your thoughts. Not necessarily embracing them, but just note when you notice them, you don't react to your thoughts. They're just there. They're just there. You notice, And how do you respond? By getting back to the counting of the breath, or back to mu, or back to what is it? The noticing and responding. Getting back, getting back, getting back. That's all you have to do. Sounds simple. It's not easy. But again, this is a lifetime process. As we continue our practice, it does get easier and easier. We can let go. All right, so that's embracing. So expose or not reacting to. Actually, I have a story related to this. To this accepting. This is from Soul Food, Stories to Nourish the Spirit and the Heart. And it's a collection of stories by Jack Kornfield and Christina Feldman. Mullah Nasruddin. So Mullah Nasruddin is kind of like this wise, sometimes it's just this wise fool in Middle Eastern stories. Sometimes he's a wild fool, sometimes he's just a fool. And they're very common and very popular, and there's hundreds of these stories. Anyway, here's one of them. Mullah Nasruddin decided to start a flower garden. He prepared the soil and planted the seeds of many beautiful flowers. But when they came up, his garden was filled not just with his chosen flowers, but also overrun by dandelions. He sought out advice from gardeners all over and tried every method known to get rid of them, but to no avail. Finally, he walked all the way to the capital to speak to the royal gardener at the Sheikh's palace. The wise old man had counseled many gardeners before and suggested a variety of remedies to expel the dandelions, but Mullah had tried them all. They sat together in silence for some time, and finally the gardener looked at Nasruddin and said, "Well, then I suggest you learn to love them." The third element he mentions is transform. And basically, we've already talked about this, but by noticing and then not reacting by, quote, loving them, by just accepting them and getting back to the practice, that's the transformation. It's to not get caught up in our thoughts, not react to our thoughts, but just getting right back to it. And that's the transformation that occurs. Here's another example of this. It's from a New York Times article from May 27, 2008. And the title of it is Lotus Therapy by Benedict Carey. And it starts off with basically a patient and a therapist. Here we go. The patient sat with his eyes closed, submerged in the rhythm of his own breathing, and after a while noticed that he was thinking about his troubled relationship with his father. "I was able to be there, present for the pain," he said, when the meditation session ended, "to just let it be what it was, without thinking it through." The therapist nodded. "Acceptance is what it was," he continued, "just letting it be, not trying to change anything." Again, not reacting to, not trying to change your thoughts, your habit patterns, your thoughts, but just noticing them. "That's it," the therapist said. "That's it, and that's big." For years, psychotherapists have worked to relieve suffering by reframing the content of patients' thoughts, directly altering behavior or helping people gain insight into the subconscious sources of their despair and anxiety. So they've tried to do that, but the promise of mindfulness meditation, We can just take it as meditation. The promise of meditation is that it can help patients endure flash floods of emotion during the therapeutic process and ultimately alter reactions to daily experience at a level that words cannot reach. It actually just reminded me of something that on my way up here, Dharma brother was telling me about, which is, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a specialist in this, but we were talking about people who have extreme OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, compulsion disorder. And in their rational minds, they know what they're doing, this obsessive thing that they may be doing is foolish, but they can't help but do it. And so here's an example. It's of a person who, when they leave the house and they take 20 steps to the parking lot and to the garage and get into the car. And before getting in the car, there's this one particular person who they needed to retrace their steps back to the house before leaving. All right, so it's it sounds really, and the person realizes that's irrational. So I'm not sure if this person is a practitioner, but this is what they train themselves to do, that they got help with, which is they get to the car, they leave their house and get to the car, and then instead of retracing their steps, they start feeling that anxiety, and they don't react to the anxiety. They don't react by going back, retracing their steps. They just stand there and they just feel the anxiety, and eventually, I don't know how long it takes, eventually that anxiety will pass and they can get into the car. Might not be 100% foolproof when they're doing this, but eventually, if they do that, if they just stand at the car and experience, not do anything with the anxiety, just stay with the anxiety, it will pass. And then that obsessive compulsion will slowly, retracing one's steps, that will slowly but surely pass. And they might not do it anymore. Or they'll do it less frequently, and it'll eventually will pass. A little more about this. After mastering control of attention, some therapists say a person can turn mentally to face a threatening or troubling thought about, say, a strained relationship with a parent, and learn simply to endure the anger or sadness and let it pass, without lapsing into rumination or trying to change the feeling, a move that often backfires. Again, like I just mentioned, to try and suppress these negative emotional emotional habits or thoughts, you're just adding fuel to the fire. You're just creating more thoughts. One woman, a doctor who had been in therapy for years to manage bouts of disabling anxiety, recently began seeing a therapist in Austin, Texas, who incorporates mindfulness meditation into her practice. This patient had plenty to worry about, including a mentally ill child, a divorce, and what she described as a, quote, harsh internal voice, Miss Logan said. After practicing meditation, she continued to feel anxious at times, but told the therapist, Miss Logan, I can stop and observe my feelings and thoughts and have compassion for myself. And then finally, it's a shift from having our mental health defined by the content of our thoughts to having it defined by our relationship to that content, and changing that relationship by sitting with, noticing, and becoming disentangled from our definition of ourselves. Back to Gogu. It is the self, the small s self, in all of its manifestations that conceals our true nature. We must begin here to appreciate the teachings of silent illumination so we can live the truth of our intrinsic freedom. So he's talking about silent illumination. It's kind of broad. It doesn't really describe silent illumination, although later on in the book he does kind of, when he's analyzing or making a comment on this Chinese master's sutra, he says it's most similar to shikantaza. Again, that's this practice of just you're not putting your attention on anything. You're just basically sitting, not controlling the breath, not following the breath. That is, not trying to control anything, but just you're like a satellite, just receiving, and not reacting to, just experiencing. We must begin here to appreciate the teachings of silent illumination so we can live the truth of our intrinsic freedom. Next section, Buddha nature. Buddha nature, our true nature, is simply freedom. It is not a thing. If it were, then it would have a before and an after. It would be subject to birth and death, and would be either permanent or impermanent. Buddha nature is inconceivable. We too are inconceivable. This inconceivability is that right here and right now, we are free. It is not a thing. Reminds me of this calligraphy in the teacher's quarters back at Arnold Park, which says, from the very beginning, there's not a single thing. The Buddha once said, not this, not that. So what is it? Buddha nature also means the, quote, potential for Buddhahood, quote, in all beings. The potential for Buddhahood in all beings. The word Buddha means awake. So this means we all have the potential for awakening. Mahayana scriptures provide the analogy of a womb. Sanskrit word, tathagata garbha. Say that again. Mahayana scriptures provide the analogy of a womb within the Buddha. Mahayana scriptures provide the analogy of a womb within which a Buddha resides. Tathagata is an epithet for Buddha, and garbha means womb or storehouse. So Tathagata garbha means Buddha in the womb. But Tathagata literally means one who has thus come and is thus gone. There's that impermanence again. Tathagata literally means, quote, one who has thus come and is thus gone, close quote, or simply as if come, as if gone. While Buddhas may seem to have come and gone, they are neither coming nor going. They are not born and do not die. Birth and death are temporary displays of causes and conditions. The same is true for us. Our true nature is beyond birth and death. Oh, sorry, Errol, can you bring me a clock? Potential is possibility. If we lack the potential for awakening, then practice would be useless. Again, if we lack the potential for awakening, then practice would be useless. An apple seed, under the right conditions, produces an apple tree because the potential already exists in the seed. Cause leads to effect. The effect already exists in the cause. All beings, even murderers, have the same potential for awakening. We are possibilities. Every single one of us. Reminds me, Zen Master Hakuin, what do we lack? We lack faith in ourselves. Just believe it, we are possibilities. In the Buddha's time, there lived a killer named Angulimala. The young man, originally a devout practitioner of another path, was very handsome, and his teacher's wife fell in love with him. She tried to seduce him, but he resisted her. Then she became vengeful and told her husband and Angulimala had tried to seduce her. The teacher believed her, and even though Angulimala was a good student, this teacher decided that he had to get rid of him. He told the students that he was going to give them, quote, a secret teaching, but first he had asked them to kill 1,000 people and bring him their fingers. Angulimala was reluctant to do so, but the teacher insisted that he must prove himself capable of learning the greatest teaching of all. This secret teaching, well, that's certainly not the Zen way. There is no secret teaching. There is nothing to get. In fact, by doing this, let me just retrace my steps here. Yeah, he had to kill 1,000 people. Angulimala was reluctant to do so, but the teacher insisted that he must prove himself capable of learning the greatest teaching of all. In fact, his plan was to get Angulimala killed in the process. Angulimala finally decided to comply with his teacher's instructions and, being a strong young man, succeeded in killing 999 people. In that frenzy of killing, he lost his mind. And Guogu says, I'm sure we have all had the experience of really getting into something and losing our way. When Angulimala had one last victim to kill, guess who he sees? He sees the Buddha coming down the road. Angulimala ran towards the Buddha with his sword with the intent to kill his last victim and complete his task. The Buddha was walking slowly, and it seemed Angulimala would have no difficulty finishing him off, but the young man found that he could not catch up to the master, even though the Buddha appeared to not be moving at all. Angulimala finally called out to the Buddha in frustration, "Stop!" And the Buddha replied, "Angulimala, I have already stopped for the sake of all beings. It is you who have not stopped." Angulimala was so moved that he abandoned his ways and became a monk under Shakyamuni. Soon he became an arhat, that's the deeply enlightened one, a liberated person, and entered nirvana. All right, so what's the point of this story? It seems so extreme, this fable. We may think that so Guogu goes on, we may think that Angulimala was born with Buddha nature, but somehow lost it when he became deluded by his actions. Some people believe that all children are born, quote, innocent, but lose that inherent innocence through the conditioning of culture and family or through the pain and suffering caused by their experience. Likewise, we might think that it's possible to lose our Buddha nature, but this interpretation is inaccurate. Buddha nature is the nature of emptiness. It can take the form of a child, and it can also manifest as an Angulimala who does horrible things as a result of certain causes and conditions. But amid delusion and conditioning, Buddha nature is never lost. It's always there. Always. In the face of all the difficulties that we experience, each one of us tries to live the best way we can, responding to whatever conditions we find ourselves in. Those who are suffering and harming others are simply giving form to the workings of Buddha nature in delusion. When we're awakened, Buddha nature expresses itself as wisdom. When we are deluded, it appears as ignorance. We must awaken to who we are in order to embody the truth of our Buddha nature amid the complexities of life. We can't recognize Buddha nature because we are so steeped in our created world of dualities. Me here, all of you out there, self and other. Them and us and them. We perpetuate notions of good and evil, gaining and losing, success and failure, victim and perpetrator, all of which resolve around the central vantage point of me, I, and mine. It is precisely due to this self-referential polarization that we suffer and inflict the same suffering on others. We can free ourselves from this cycle by not confusing emotional afflictions with our true nature, by not confusing the furniture with the spaciousness of the room. So the spaciousness of this room. He's describing enlightenment, a vast emptiness, by not confusing the furniture and the spaciousness of the room. When we free ourselves in this way, we allow the Buddha nature of those around us to also manifest. Through our understanding, we can engage with all beings in such a way as to help them bring out their own wisdom and compassion. To do all this, we must engage in practice. So that's the strength, that's the power of all of us right here, is Sangha. At least this has been my experience through practice, especially my early years. It is hard, it kind of really is practically impossible to see the changes that may occur within myself. Because everything has changed. And the more we practice, we continually refine the mind, this Buddha mind, the more one can change, let's put it that way. It's so hard to see it in ourselves. It's so hard to see it in ourselves. But with practicing with Sangha, with others, we start to notice the changes in others. And that can be fortifying for our own practice. To see that we're not stuck, that we're free, that we're not this person, we're not that person, I'm like this, I'm like that. These habitual mental conceptions that we have of ourselves. Yes, we do react to negative emotional reactions, but as time goes on through this transformation, it can change. Some things we drop right away, and some things we don't. Some things take longer. Some things takes a lifetime of practice, but it does get lighter. Enlightenment, it does get lighter. I think I get so kind of, there's my endless blame passion right there. I get so, I feel so strongly about this. I'm trying to convey this because there's so many occasions where I've seen where people just kind of lose the faith in their practice. And then, I don't know, they disappear, they don't come to the center. They certainly might still be practicing on their own, or they've moved on to another practice, but there are other times I feel that perhaps they've lost faith and they've just kind of stopped practicing. It just really the key to this is perseverance, to just keep doing it. Just be as stubborn as a mule. Just keep moving. Just keep doing it. Day after day after day, and things will change. It's that faith. And it's not an all or nothing thing either. Because we do see the change. It might just be a slight, but like especially if one can manage to go to an extended sitting or do sesshin. And then that's when the Yasutani Roshi used to say that a 7-day sesshin is kind of is the equivalent of 3 years of just daily practice. I'm not so sure about that, but that just points to the power of sesshin. You can't put a number on it, 3 years of daily practice. But with all the sitting of us together for these 2 days, it does make a difference. We start to see things more clearly. We start to change, because we are change. Back to Gogu. As my teacher once said, people who experience personal suffering and undergo calamities and disasters are all great bodhisattvas. Why should we reduce them to pitiable victims? Conversely, why should we see those who inflict harm as perpetrators? Is it possible that they are themselves victims in some way? Moreover, do their actions possibly reflect our own tendencies to some extent? Could we see them as bodhisattvas and let them draw out our compassion for ourselves and them, and therefore change the world? What is unjust and wrong must be corrected, but we can do this with wisdom and compassion for ourselves and others. All beings, including us, are suffering in a world of oppositions. Yet in this suffering, there is also Buddha nature and awakening. Buddha nature is not something we've lost, but it is present right here and right now. It's not a primordial state that we have to get back to. If we think like this, then we will create an opposition of past and present. We might even blame others for why we've lost it in the first place. We may see ourselves as the victims of our history, our culture, our education system, and so forth. All the things that have made us, quote, quote, lose our true nature. Well, I want to say that again. We may see ourselves as the victims of our history, our culture, our education system, and so forth. All the things that have made us, quote, lose our true nature. The thing I was pointing out here is we see ourselves as victims. He's not saying that those things don't have an influence of us. Of course they do. Our own personal history, our own perhaps trauma some of us may have, just conditioning in society and our education system, that's all kind of relevant, and it enforces it. The bottom line is all of this enforces this notion of a separate self. It's going back to that word, deep-seated conditioning. We all have it. And it affects us. Of course it affects us. But what Gogu here is talking about is seeing ourselves as a victim of it. We're a receiver of it. We have all of our own baggage of conditioning. But through the slow, steady practice, we can get through it. And it doesn't, we're not as affected by the winds of change. We're not affected by this conditioning so much as we loosen things up. We pull apart these psychic knots that we've taken upon ourselves, that we've created through this diluted notion of self and other. Buddha nature manifests in all situation and at all times. It is empty of fixations, but full of possibilities. It can be empty of delusions, but full of compassion. This is the correct understanding. Whatever difficulties we may face, it's all good. IAG, as I like to say. We practice engaging with all sentient beings so as to free all from suffering. All right, chapter 3, underlying feeling tones. There's a section called How to Cultivate Right Attitudes. How to cultivate right attitudes. We can cultivate right attitudes through a fourfold process of exposing, embracing, transforming, and letting go. All right, so we've covered that. When practitioners come across the familiar Buddhist teachings of non-grasping, they think that they have to let go of everything, that this is something they can do right away, and that once they've done so, everything will be fine. The truth is, we have to first see what it is that we have to let go of. We have to expose our subtle emotional afflictions and negative habits. In exposing them, we may recognize that they have been part of us for a long time, that there is history behind our behaviors. There's that conditioning, a deep-seated conditioning. They may be part of our defense mechanisms and survivor skills. So, we have to accept them. Only when we accept them will we be able to take responsibility for and work through them. Let me say that again. Only when we accept them will we be able to take responsibility for and work through them. Then we will no longer be under their influence. This is letting go of them. I have this memory. I must have been like 10, 11 years old, and I just remember my brother and I were sitting on our parents' bed. Everyone was awake, and it was New Year's. That's right. It was New Year's Day, and I just remember having this thought: from now on, I'm going to be calm and centered. I'm just going to be a good boy. So where did that come from? I still don't know to this day where that came from. It probably comes from that's how my parents wanted me to be, because my younger brother, bless his heart, was a pretty difficult kid. And my dad and my brother used to lock horns all the time. So I just kind of was bent on being like a calm kid and a good boy. And I realize now through practice and some therapy that you paid a cost for that. I paid a huge cost emotionally with that. I just kind of suppressed everything just to be a good Canadian boy. And so that's an example of conditioning that can really, these emotional, mental habits that we have to unfold, we have to uncurl, we have to loosen those knots. And we loosen those knots by just practicing and noticing and not reacting and getting back to it. Notice and respond. This is a long process. And it is not linear, but circular. The more we're able to see, the more we need to embrace. How about accept? Let's go back to that. The more we're able to see, the more we need to accept. The more we accept and let our feelings come through us, the more we are able to expose the deeper layers of our habits. The more we work through them, the more we are able to let go and accept ourselves. In time, we become freer. It's authentic. Zen practice is about becoming more authentic. Accepting ourselves for all of the various defilements that we have. Not accepting them, not dwelling in them. All right. So I reacted again. Just get back to mu. Get back to who. This is who I am right now. But when am I? It's this belief, this faith in impermanence that we can change. And we may react strongly over and over and over again in our practice and in our daily life. But it's not who we really ultimately are, and we can be freer. The more we work through them, the more we are able to let go and accept ourselves. In time, we become freer. This letting go is actually the easiest part of the process because it happens naturally and suddenly, but we must first do our preparatory work. We cannot anticipate when these habitual tendencies will release themselves, and we cannot will it to happen. Practice is a lifetime process that brings out the best in us. This is such an important point. There's not a schedule. We create these schedules in our minds, perhaps, about how we want to be, or I'm gonna wake up in the next year, the next 2 years, the next 3 years. It just doesn't work that way. Why? Because again, it's this idea, thought, attachments of a goal in mind. It's just so counterproductive. Notice the goal that might occur in the mind, notice it, and get back to it. Get back to the practice. We cannot anticipate when these habitual tendencies will release themselves, and we cannot will it to happen. Practice is a lifetime process that brings out the best in us. All right, it seems like a good place to stop. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.